Welcome to Stop the Fight, and today we are recapping Jake Paul's victory over Tyron Woodley. Let's go!
Don't brag about taking my side piece! Don't brag about taking my side piece, though!
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong, man. Good boy, just...
He did a good job, Jake Paul. He did a good job boxing from the outside and winning a comfortable split decision. Now, I don't know about that judge that had it for Tyron Woodley. I don't know what fight he was watching. But in boxing, you just stepping forward is not enough to win rounds. You actually have to throw punches. And except for one round, except for the fourth, Tyron Woodley threw like no punches. He threw no punches. He was gun shy the entire time. And guys, it doesn't matter if Jake Paul wasn't landing too many damaging shots. He was landing the only shots. How many times did Jake Paul land the jab and the left hook? That's all I saw in the entire fight was Jake Paul circling on the outside for the majority of the fight, tossing a jab. His hey, remember, this is Jake Paul's only been boxing for a couple of years. So his trainers, BJ Flores and Love and whoever else in his camp, taught him how to box properly. When the other opponent is not a boxer, when the first thing you should learn in boxing, and Baranchik, and we'll talk about this later on in the podcast, is to use the jab. If you know how to use a jab, as George Foreman said, boxing is easy. You have to learn how to use the jab. You can beat a non-boxer or a guy who's only trying to get you with power shots just by using the jab. Because you can disrupt their rhythm, you disrupt their distance, you can disrupt their timing. You can do a lot of things with just a simple jab to the face, to the body, and the movement, of course. And Jake did that. Yes, Jake looked clumsy in there. Yes, he didn't look like a natural boxer. But you know what he did look like? The better boxer between the two of them. He wasn't the better athlete. He wasn't the stronger guy. He wasn't the more explosive guy. But he was the better boxer over 8 rounds. There is no controversy. I have no idea about the people who are saying that Tyron Woodley should have won. I don't know what fight you guys are watching. I have no idea what you guys are scoring. It doesn't matter whether you wanted Jake to win or lose. He won the fight comfortably. Here's the one caveat I'll give you. It seemed that in the fourth, the ropes kept Jake up, so that should have probably been a knockdown. But I had it. As close as 5-3 for Jake Paul, and as wide, guys, literally as 7-1 for Jake Paul. Outside of the fourth round, there was no other clear round for Tyron. You could have given Woodley maybe 2 more rounds, and that's it. Maybe you have a 5-3, and maybe if the knockdown counts, you still lose the fight. Realistically, I think I had it giving Tyron the benefit of the doubt, giving him every single close round, and obviously the fourth round that he won without question. I had a 5-3. Even with the knockdown, Jake Paul wins. But I thought that realistically, I remember one of the rounds I gave to Tyron, I was like, really, you can just give that to Jake because Jake was the one that was moving better, doing what he wanted to do. Remember, ring generalship is doing in the fight what you want to do. That means circling and playing matador, which is what Jake Paul was doing. He was playing matador to Tyron Woodley the entire time. And it was successful for 95% of the time, except for the few times he ended up on the ropes. So if the round... Just so you guys know how to score a fight. If in the round, not only does Jake Paul outland Tyron Woodley, but is the one who's circling and throwing the jab, that means that he's keeping the fight in his domain. And that meaning keeping Tyron on the outside. That means in terms of ring generalship, he wins that round. Just coming forward and throwing ineffective aggression, which is what Tyron was doing, he wasn't even throwing. Just stepping forward is not enough to win a fight. Just throwing an occasional punch in that round is not enough to win that round. In other words, if Jake Paul spent the majority of the time on the ropes, even if he was eating shots on the gloves, you can give those rounds to Tyron. Why? Because he's controlling the ring. That's ring generalship. He has Jake Paul in the position he wants him to and is trying to execute his plan. At almost no point in the fight was that happening. Most of the fight was fought on the outside, Jake Paul circling and jabbing. That means that's the fight that he wanted to fight. His trainers were right. They said, okay, look, if you can land on Jake Paul, if you can land on Tyron Woodley, do so. But we want you to fight on the outside. We want you to keep that jab going. And they were yelling some funny command. I forgot what it was. Like, you have some swag or whatever the hell they were saying. Basically, what they wanted him to do was just keep moving. They didn't want him to stand there and get into a fight with Tyron. They didn't want him because Tyron obviously has been a professional fighter for 20 years. Yes, he was not a boxer, but he's a professional fighter. So what Jake did was listen to his corner, kept jabbing even when he was exhausted. That's another thing, by the way, guys. By rounds 6, 7, and 8, Jake was exhausted. Those 3 last rounds were fought on willpower and determination, something I told you that Jake had. He won those last 3 rounds. When things got tough, remember, it got tough for him in the 4th. He came back in the 5th and slowed that pace right back down. And even though he was already gassed coming into the 6th round, I was worried, he was able to maintain his original pace. Remember, only the 4th round was clear for Tyron. Yes, I think the 5th was still kind of like a 50-50 round, and maybe the 6th was a 50-50 round. But 1 to 3 were clear Jake rounds, and I think 7 and 8 were clear Jake rounds. Like clear. Like I can't imagine you giving Tyron those rounds. And at one point, I think it was in the 6th and 7, and exhausted Jake Paul lands a really nice overhand right on Tyron, has a sweat flying. So this narrative about Jake Paul robbing Tyron Woodley or any of this other nonsense I'm reading online is nothing else but that. It's nonsense. Guys, Tyron Woodley lost. And in a way, yes, this was embarrassing. This was embarrassing. You are a damn fighter. I understand you're not a boxer, but coming in there and being gun-shy against the kid who has had 3 professional fights, 1 against another YouTuber, 1 against some NBA player, and 1 against Teletubby-looking-ass Ben Askren. And this is the kind of performance you put on. Look, I understand some people are mad at Tyron, but they have reason to be mad. You can't be gun-shy against this kid. You're the better athlete. You look more muscular. Jake Paul looked like he was in shape, but he looked like he's not a guy who's been fighting. His elbows were a little bit like, yeah, he had to keep them tucked in, but like at points his arms looked a little weird. His footwork wasn't that natural, but this is all like reasonable for a guy who's only fought for like 2 or 3 years. The fact that he's on the largest stage, pay-per-view Showtime, fighting against Tyron Woodley, who's a Hall of Famer in the UFC. Tyron Woodley's not just a fighter. He's a Hall of Fame level fighter in the UFC, an MMA fighter. That is, you have to give Jake the accolades. You have to. And the fight was actually pretty interesting because of this dynamic. Sometimes what happens when you have like 2 kind of non-boxers boxing, the fights are either extraordinarily sloppy or just uninteresting. But because they were actually boxing in there, the fight turned out to be interesting and entertaining. You remember, you don't need to knock someone's head off and have a crazy knockout for a fight to be entertaining. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was entertaining because of that dynamic. So, what happens here? Well, at the end, after the fight, Tyron says he wants a rematch. I don't see a reason why Jake should give Tyron the rematch. It almost makes no sense to. Nor do I think that Tyron would win. He hasn't shown, if he didn't show urgency in round 8, in round 5, in round 6, in round 7, why would we believe that he would show urgency in a second fight? Additionally, do you not think that someone like Jake Paul is actually getting better with every fight? Of course he is. He just won 8 rounds with you. He now knows how to jab you. Why do you think you'd have a better shot in the next round? He's felt your power. Tyron Woodley landed that big right hand. Jake took it, and he kind of was able to recover. What do you think happens between now and half a year if you were to potentially have a rematch? Well, Jake Paul gets better, and you do not. That's almost guaranteed, as you're adding more mileage to you, more years, more months in this case. Jake Paul just added more experience. At 24, guys, you have to remember that fighters are still maturing physically at 24. Now, you can say that maybe not Jake. Maybe he's a bigger kid. He's already kind of done. Mature, but maybe not. I think he's actually still has some room to mature. He's still putting on some man size, manpower. Not to mention that the more he boxes, the better he's going to get on. Think about Wilder. Forget about his last loss, but he's a better fighter now than he was even 6 years ago. Why? Because this is what happens when you're late to the game. You're going to keep getting better. Sergio Martinez was better at 37 than he ever was at 27. This is, without a case, the truth. Without a doubt, the truth. So, Jake Paul's going to get better in 6 months. He just won 8 rounds. This is his first 8-round fight, guys. He hasn't been beyond 2 rounds. And here he is. He went 8 against against the Hall of Fame UFC fighter. Say whatever you want about Jake Paul's antics on YouTube. The guy has more than proven himself in the ring now. Is he a professional fighter? No. Is he going to fight someone who's a professional fighter who can get him more experience? No. He's obviously not trying to do that. Why would he? He's too old to take on boxing legitimately. And I'm sure even if he did want to take boxing, I'm sure he can become like a middling contender. Maybe even sniff the top 10. I think he has that ability because he's shown that determination. But why did he do that? He has millions upon millions of dollar fights coming up if he wants to take them. Like I said, there shouldn't be a Tyron Woodley rematch. There's no need. There's significantly bigger fish to fry. He goes up against one of the Diaz brothers, was Nate or whoever the hell it is. How hilarious would that be? Although I don't know about that fight for him, but because Diaz is a tough dude, and what he did with McGregor. I mean, the thing is, I think Diaz could be like this jab the same way. He likes to stand straight up. Whatever. I'm not even gonna speculate on that fight right now. But he has a lot of money fights. Can you imagine a McGregor fight? Can you imagine the kind of money this does? McGregor versus Jake Paul. Why would he fight Tyron Woodley when he can be staring at a $50-60 million paycheck against McGregor? And McGregor too. Remember, this will be outside the UFC. You forget what Jake Paul says about the UFC is completely correct. The UFC doesn't pay its fighters. Boxers make significantly more money than UFC fighters. Why? Is because boxing is a more popular sport? No, it's not anymore. That's something us boxing fans just have to be honest with ourselves. Outside of the biggest fight, boxing is not a more popular sport. Then why? Because boxing is decentralized. As corny as that sounds, that word decentralized now, you hear it all the time due to the whole fucking crypto shit and DeFi. It's decentralized. In MMA, you either fight for the UFC or you fight for some unknown body. Yes, there's Strikeforce. Yes, there's one championship and so on and so forth. But realistically, there's the UFC and then there's the minor leagues. That's the way it's looked at. Which means if you want to make it in MMA, you have to go fight for the UFC. Which means that Dana White and the UFC owners can dictate your salary because you cannot go elsewhere. This is not the way boxing works. Those of you who do not know the way boxing works, and one of the negatives and also positives for boxing is there are basically 4 major sanctioning bodies: the IBO, the IBF, the WBC, the WBO, and the WBA. That's 5. One of them is not a major. I think I said the IBF is definitely major. WBC definitely legendary. WBA, WBO. That's it. Yeah, the other one, whatever I mentioned, what else I mentioned was not a major sanctioning, right? So you have those 4, which means, friends, and there's a lineal belt, which is just recognized, the ring and the lineal belts, which is just recognized as unofficial kind of like number ones. Meaning what? Meaning you do not have to fight for one conglomerate. You don't need to fight for the World Boxing Organization or the World Boxing Council under their rankings to become a known fighter. You can fight under any of these organizations and rank up, and the fans will see you and they'll demand you, and you can make the money. You can make a lot of money. And there are many fighters who spend their entire careers just defending one belt. There was that European fighter, I forgot his name. I forgot how to pronounce it. The Polish fighter who was fighting in Eastern Europe while Roy Jones had every other belt at light heavyweight. I can't pronounce his name right now. And he basically made a career of holding one belt. Fighters do that all the time, and fans were demanding him. They were getting paid, and he was considered a respected fighter. There's nobody outside of the UFC who people are like, yeah, he's definitely the best in the world. No, the best fighters in the world fight for the UFC, which means they can command your salary. They can say, you know what, McGregor? You are going to get paid $10 million, $15 million a fight. And that's it. We pocket the rest. In boxing, that's not the way it works. If Bob Arum, as he did to Mayweather, said, look, I'm going to keep paying you $2 or $3 million a fight. Mayweather said, I'm going on my own. I'm my own man, my own fighter. I'll do this myself. And now he was making, towards the end of his fight, he was making over $50 million a paycheck. He signed McGregor a flat paycheck of $75 million, and McGregor took it up right away. Why? Why? Well, because that's more money than he'll see in 6 UFC fights. You know what I mean? And this is what's happening in boxing. This is why fighters can get paid like this. This is why a McGregor, what's his name? Jake Paul fight will do significantly more in boxing than he'll ever do in the UFC. If Jake Paul were, let's say, to go get signed in the UFC, he will never get paid as much as he would standalone boxing. That's the way it works. And UFC fighters know this. That's why they're making the jump to boxing in 2 seconds to get that paycheck. It's significantly larger paycheck in boxing for that reason. It's decentralized. Now, of course, what does that also means that you wind up having situations. There are 4 champions per weight class. Who's really the guy? Yes, that makes for that awkward situation. In MMA, you know who's the guy. There may be someone say, oh, there's blah, blah, blah in one fighting. But realistically, everyone knows the best of the best are in the UFC. So that was obviously tangential. But let's get back to Jake Paul. Let's get back to his jab. And we're going to talk about the Boranchuk fight to give it to you guys in kind of like contrast. So Jake Paul did nothing but just try to jab, and it worked for him. That's exactly what it was. Yes, he was a crude boxer and all the rest, but the jab won him that fight. And the left hook, because he landed that left hook on Tyron all the time. Just like, I don't know how many times he actually landed it, but it was 15, 20 times clear left hooks. Every time Tyron was coming in on an exchange. So, his trainers taught him exactly what to do to win a boxing match. Now, Boranchuk, who I think should retire, without a question, is a complete opposite type of a fighter. Boranchuk is a brawler, throws nothing but wide. I don't think he even knows what a jab is. Everything Boranchuk throws is wide, with a lot of power, meant to take your head off. But it also means that when you're fighting against another guy who can jab, you're going to run into shots. And this is what was happening in the Love fight. Montana Love kept setting him up with the same exact shot over and over and over and over again. Now, that's obviously where my parlay ended. I took the over 8.5. This ended at round 7 with Montana Love stopping Boranchuk. He was stopped actually in his corner. Boranchuk was able to get up, went to his corner. Fight was done. I think his career is done. A fighter like Boranchuk has only so many miles on him. These guys, they are like, the old saying, they burn bright. His early career fights were exciting. He would tank through, maul through people. But you take so much punishment in these kind of fights that your chin and your nervous system and your brain, they will break. And I think Boranchuk is done. You had a pretty touching scene at the end where his wife was, I think, clearly imploring him to stop. He's 28 years old, but he's a shot fighter. He may as well be 36, 37, 38 in terms of fight years. That fight with Zapata, and I mentioned it before. That's what I was thinking. That's what I was telling you guys. I was thinking about taking Love just outright because of that. And I should have. I didn't. And then it wouldn't matter because I took the under in the Jake Paul fight. So my parlay got, every other fight was good. But it didn't matter because, like I said, Jake Paul took Tyron to the decision where I took the under. But you have to give Montana Love credit. Now, is he ready for the other guys? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He was himself nearly knocked out and hurt by Boranchuk, I think, in one of the earlier rounds. He boxed well, I think, for the first 3 or 4, and then he took the shot at the end of the round, and the ropes kept him up, sort of. Anyway, a younger Boranchuk, I think, would have stopped Love, for sure, actually. And so, but Love needs a lot more seasoning. Names like Crawford and whatnot. That's you can forget about those right now. He's not there yet. Nothing wrong with that, by the way, but he's just not there yet. Does he get there? I don't know. His power was evident against Boranchuk, but I think it was more to the case that Boranchuk was just a soft fighter running into southpaw counter left hands. He was just pulling back and shooting that left uppercut. He did that so many times. He would hop left, hop right, hop left, pull, boom. And that's the way that the fight ended. So Boranchuk, he really does need to retire. He had a fight of the year with Zapata last year, but I think that finally just took the last bit of chin that he had left. He has no business being stopped by Love. He should not be allowed to fight again. His family needs to get him out of there. He's going to have severe brain damage and pugilist dementia if he continues to fight. He's exhibiting all the signs of a shot fighter. And This can end in tragedy for him. He needs to call it a career right here. He doesn't have it. He doesn't have it anymore. You see this with fighters. You see this with Bam Bam Rios. I bring him up often. He's a different fighter at 135 than he ever was, anything over that weight. And after a while, you just take too much punishment. Bam Bam sounds like he's slurring already, and he's in his mid to late 30s. Like, you can't let Baranchyk fight. If you're his wife, if you're his trainer, if you're his promoter, you can't let him fight. That's it. That's it. That's all I'm going to say about Baranchyk. He had a pretty good career. I think he won one of the titles, actually. He gave Taylor a good fight. And he had the fight of the year, of course, against Zapata. This is it, though. This is where it's the end of the line for him. Let's talk about what else we saw on the undercard. Tommy Fury looked like shit against, what was his name? The MMA fighter. Can he beat Jake Paul? Maybe, but only because he would be a bigger guy. He knows how to jab. He's a good-looking kid. And that alone, I think, will cause Jake issues. I know they're talking about, but I don't see why. They're not going to do the kind of numbers with Tommy Fury that they would if he just gets out another UFC fighter. There's no reason for Jake Paul to fight Tommy Fury. If Tommy Fury wants to continue taking the sport seriously, he's got to fight someone else who has a winning record. I mentioned it in Thursday's episode that the records of the fighters Tommy Fury has been fighting is abysmal. Those records are abysmal. Hey, I don't think there's been a single winning record fighter, and numerous guys with no victories at all that he was fighting. Who else did we have? Amanda Serrano boxed wonderfully, and I told you, she boxes really, really well. There was a lot of nonsense said at the end of the fight by her trainer, showing no class, talking about how the fighter, Mercado said, didn't fight Mexican style. There's no need for that shit. There's no need for that shit. You already won the fight. Shut the fuck up. That's that kind of bragging winner, especially Amanda Serrano looked good, but Mercado did fine. No need. The trainer has just made himself look like an ass and completely uncalled for, especially when Serrano was humble in victory. And like I said, there's no need for it. But if you guys did watch the fight, she boxed beautifully. I don't think the Katie Taylor fight does happen, but if it does, I would absolutely take Serrano to win that fight. Now, we had the boys against Cusimano, and like I said, I think that under 1.5 was obvious. If someone like Bogdan Dinu, who went against world-class heavies, didn't last 2 rounds, I had no doubt whatsoever that the boys was going to come in and just blow him out. I should have just maybe taken this fight and just slammed the money on it. Because, the boys obviously took him out within the first half of the first round. Big, strong kid. I mean, he himself took shots coming in. Obviously, that's what happens when you try to go headhunting the way he does. I don't know if the boys is going to be a world champion. I think he has it to become a world champion in this era, but we want to see him against the Joyce-level opponent again, which is a legit guy in the top 10. We need to see him in there with an Areola, Wilder, or Ruiz. There's a lot of guys in the top 10 who can test the boys. And like I said, he did lose to Joyce, and that was a real grind and fight. Now, of course, he's a young heavy. He's like 23, 24. This kid's really young. I know he looks like he's 34, 35, but he's a really young kid. So he's only going to get better, and he has all the physical tools. Very strong puncher, very big guy, menacing look. These are all the things that are important when it comes to a heavyweight champion. So I think he can definitely, if he gets better, gets a little more defensively responsible, and gets tested more, I think he may have what it takes to become a champ. But we'll see. So guys, if you haven't watched the fight, you should check it out because again, Jake Paul did a great job, and this is for you kids. Or anyone who's like an amateur fighter, anyone who wants to see how you win an actual boxing match, this is how you do it. That's how it's done. You jab from the distance and you keep circling against the guy who is a stronger, more athletic guy than you, but who's only going to try and throw one shot and sporadically at that. This is the way you win a fight. He won it clearly, guys. Clearly. I think, let's talk about his impact, by the way, towards boxing. And I think Jake Paul has been a boon for boxing. He really has. He has put many eyes on the sport. People are talking about the sport. People are talking about the intricacies. You know, like even the people who think that Tyron Woodley got robbed are at least forced to analyze a fight, forced to discuss about what boxing is. They're seeing clips of other fighters and so on and so forth. This only helps boxing. Only helps boxing. Like I know some people are saying, oh, let's make it a mockery of the sport. Boxing is a mockery itself. It's prize fighting. It's supposed to be a mockery. If you can get the tallest guy versus the shortest guy and people will pay for it, then that's a boxing fight. You know, like this is like this kind of freakish aspect of the sport. That's what it's all about. That's what you want to see, these killers, these giants, these, call them monsters fight. It's the same thing in MMA. There's a reason why Ngannou and all these like Kimbo Slice events came through, because that's what people want to see. Yes, it's a sport, but it's also a prize fight. And it's actually primarily a prize fight. And it's about what people want to see. That's the way these sports live and die. And people want to see Jake Paul now. More people have seen boxing, and more people will get into it. Like I said, if he gets 10,000 kids to try out boxing and only one of them, and only 1% of them become boxers, then that's 100 kids that are now boxing. If you gets 10,000, that's 100 kids that are now boxing professionally. And if 1% of 1% become world champions, then we just got a new world champion because Jake Paul decided to box. So, never discount that kind of stuff, guys. It's important. We want our sport to grow. And Jake Paul is doing that. So I hope you guys had fun. I hope maybe if you guys didn't listen to my bets, you took other bets, you made some money. Again, none of this was financial advice. And it's never financial advice. You're your own people. You make your own bet. All right, that's going to do it for me. I'll see you guys on a Thursday. It's over.
I'm going to go home and break my wife's hip.
Don't brag about taking my side piece. Don't brag about taking my side piece, though.
I broke my back. Back is broken. Spinal.
He's strong, man. Good boy, just...